Prevailing language ideologies. Now, before we move on to this context within which certain types of ideologies were prevalent, let me remind you about the previous module and what we concluded from it. So, we realized that languages were distributed in the different school systems on class basis. That is, so the language that is English, which was highly valued in the language policy and which was a symbol of power and prestige, where it was accessible by only those that had a higher income in the families. Now, although we can say that there were only 7 of them which were most proficient, however, everyone knew some sort of English. Now, if we look at the government school participants, we realize that only those with a higher income bracket were able to access Urdu language. They had minimal English language skills, and so they could not really understand English very well. But those from the working class or from the lowest cadre of this income bracket had no Urdu skills also. So they almost did not have literacy skills in any of the languages despite spending 10 years in the same school. You might think of it how they pass their metric exam. Well, there are different ways. We all know how students do pass the metric exams, and we need to sort of keep that in mind. So, what were the ideologies within which these findings were grounded? Hegemony of English. English language was considered a symbol of education. So, we are saying those who knew English were educated, those who did not know English, no matter how knowledgeable they might be, were considered as not educated or not knowledgeable by all the participants. We have this feeling from these participants that English was symbolic of strong family background, and English language learning was also related to intelligence. Although ironically, it was a matter of getting an opportunity or not. This was related to this personal ability of the individuals, whether they were able to learn the language or not. So we have Urdu. Urdu was seen as a national language. There was an affiliation with it, and people felt almost like a moral obligation to sort of stand by it and support it. It was considered an indispensable tool for communication, especially for those minorities that spoke languages other than Urdu or the mainstream languages. For them, it enabled them to actually access resources for their families and for themselves by using a language that connected now their homes with the wider society outside. Paradoxically, despite all this thing about Urdu as a national language, Urdu as a symbol of Pakistani identity, argued and presented by everyone, apart from this being considered as the lingua franca, highly important for communication, Urdu medium was considered a stigma. And this came out very clearly from the private school participants, and which was accepted by the government school participants also. So Sindhi was considered as a communal identity. It led to a sense of bonding within the group. However, again, this one also was avoided in favor of Urdu to assert a more educated identity. So English language definitely emerged as a stratifying principle, the difference between have and have-nots. So this was almost like a colonial dichotomy between others and self, in which you see others as inferior as uncivilized, and you see yourself as more superior and more civilized. And this stereotyping, interestingly, was accepted, understood by even those who were suffering because of this ideology, that is the government school participants. And this is exactly how symbolic dominance works. It works with the consent of the people that it is working against. And this we'll talk about more with our findings in the coming lectures.